Okay, so my name is Jim Lanny, and I'm the CEO of Intellective Statistics. Really, we started out doing kind of statistic solutions, helping folks with methodologies and other aspects of the dissertation, and then evolved in the past decade to really doing um, quantitative and qualitative analysis tools, mostly because they were clunky. The other ones were clunky. You know, they had the legacy, they had the funding, but they didn't seem to be serving the what was my experience of students and faculty and hospitals. So we've developed Intellectus statistics, Intellectus qualitative, and this is the kind of the prelude to that, right? So you know, I've lots of experience with folks coming to me around quant methods and saying, you know, help me out, okay, particularly with the data analysis plan. And we'll spend some time talking about the data analysis plan. I like to use the metaphor of a cookbook for quant methodology is where I'm going to start. And the idea here is a few things. One is that you want the methodology to be so clean that you can hand that methodology to your next door neighbor who knows nothing and they can replicate your study. That's the key thing. Do you have enough information to replicate the study? Do I know who the participants are? Do I know the instruments that you're using? Do I know how you're going to administer those instruments to those participants? Do I know how I'm going to analyze the data? Right. So, if you're doing any kind of methodology, you want enough information for folks to replicate. By the way, you don't want too much information. You don't want literature review stuff. You don't want things of that sort. So, you know, every chapter's got its own pieces. All right. But the methodology is just the cookbook part. It's not. How did you grow the corn? What was the soil like? It's not, that's lit review stuff. This stuff is we have the corn, we mix it with this, we bake it for that, or whatever. Okay. Um, okay. So some of the bones of the quant methodology is you have to have research questions. I know DMPs, they mostly have study aims. Fine, call it whatever you'd like, but we're seeking to examine some question of some sort. Okay. All right. Participants, you know, who are they, things of that sort. What are the instruments that you're assessing? What are those outcome variables? Okay. Most people do knowledge pre to post or things of this sort. All right. Let me just linger there for a moment. When you have instruments, you want to use reliable, valid, established instruments. You do not, for any of you students out there, and maybe for faculty, you don't really want to be creating instruments unless that is your entire goal. Okay. If your entire goal is to develop a new resiliency instrument, awesome. Have at it, you know, get some different types of validity and so forth. But for most folks, you want to examine those questions or aims. You do not want to be in the scale development business. And trust me, if you want an instrument, you want to create an instrument, okay, but you really want to examine other questions, you're going to wind up in both camps that you don't really want to be in. All right. So the quick answer is have a reliable, valid instrument. All right. Now, you can adapt that instrument. They used it for educators, and I'm using it for nurses. No problem. Okay. You can have a simple crosswalk of here's the existing, okay, question. I'm adapting it in this way. Here's the final question. Okay. But so you can adapt instruments, but don't get into starting to generate new instruments, create new instruments. And by the way, for you first timers out there, okay, how is it that, and they come to me, and you come to me and you say, No one has ever studied this topic before in their life. And I say, you're a doc student, and no one in the whole globe in all of time has looked to create an instrument like this or something that's adaptable. Okay, that's a problem. You should think very carefully about changing your topic if there's no literature and no instruments around that. Okay, particularly as young faculty or doc students, there's a little urgency to things. Okay, so find other instruments. By the way, Google or Gemini or Chat, they will help you find instruments. Okay, you can put in anything. Okay, and about any topic, and they will search. All right, for instruments. In my day, okay, we had a mental measurement handbook. It was this big, okay, and we had to like flip through it to find instruments. It was a nightmare. Here, you're just typing in, okay, what you want, and they'll come up with instruments. All right. The procedure. Procedure really takes kind of two variations here. One is the procedure well, it's the whole procedure, okay? The whole arc of the procedure of your research. But I think about the procedure in a couple of ways. One is the procedure of administering instruments, okay? I'll just use knowledge pre to post. So how am I administering that, right? I'm doing it online and so forth. But there's also procedures of perhaps an intervention, right? So hospital nearby is doing a resiliency. There's a procedure to administer the resiliency pretest. There's a resiliency training, hour training, and then there's a resiliency post. Okay, so so the procedure is, what are you doing with these participants? All right. That's really important too for IRB's purposes. So they're going to want to know what you're doing with these folks, how you're protecting these folks, particularly if your participants, and unless you really must, okay, dissuade you from any vulnerable populations of participants. You do not want young kids. You do not want elderly per se, okay? You do not want incarcerated. You do not. All of these vulnerable populations are just a huge red flag for the IRB, okay? If you want to know something about the kids, maybe ask the teachers or something of this sort. So try to find out how you can avoid this, all right? Because my goal is to help you, at least articulate good questions, okay? And then be able to actually examine those questions, all right? But if you hung up in IRB for months on end, okay, or you're paying another, semester tuition, that doesn't feel good. So you want, I'll say, run-of-the-mill participants, okay, and a procedure that's articulating their safety. All right. All right. So you have your questions. You've identified your sample. You've identified your instruments and gotten permission to use those instruments, right? You have a procedure that people can follow, right? This is what I'm going to do. You shouldn't leave the reader scratching their head saying, okay, what's happening here? Okay, they have to know, they want to know, and to replicate it, they have to know what you're doing. So we've gone through this. So then we have a quantitative data analysis plan. What is that? Okay, a data analysis plan. You have to articulate basically three things, okay? Three things. You have to articulate what is the appropriate statistical test, okay? What are the assumptions of that statistical test? And what is the rationale for using that test? Everybody wants to know those three pieces, okay? And if you don't have those three pieces, you're going to have a problem. So you need to have those three, and we'll talk about how to get to that, particularly the correct test, all right? All right. The other piece is the sample size. Well, shouldn't the sample size be up with the participants? I mean, we're talking about sample size with participants. Okay? Why aren't those closer together? Right? Well, the reason is that there's two types of sample size in the world. All right. The one type of sample size is based on the general population. All right. So during the elections, right, whatever elections you want to watch, there's strategically assessed folks, and they can assess 3,000 people in the country and know within some margin of error how people are going to vote. That's an amazing thing. Okay, so I'll call it population sample sizes. That is not what most people are doing, certainly for dissertations, and I'll say, and not for journal articles. These are often convenient samples, okay? These are not true experiments where you're randomizing things, okay? This is a convenient sample typically, okay? That sample size is called a power analysis, and that power analysis or sample size determination is based on the data plan, okay? You're doing a paired t-test, based on that test, you need 34 people, all right? So the sample size determination in this context, dissertations, most research, is a power analysis based on the test. Be it ANOVA, t-test, correlation, whatever the test is, doesn't matter. Now, some data plans, which we will not get into here, some data plans just have rules of thumb, like structural equation modeling based on a number of predictors and so forth, a latent variable. Okay, so we're not talking about generalizing to the population and using population numbers. We're not using general rules of thumb, okay, that for some types of analysis do not have a specific, okay, sample size. All righty. So let's get to the data plan, because frankly, that's all I heard for 15 years, okay? Help me with the data plan. What test do I use? And by the way, there is no blame or shame going on here, okay? A lot of programs kind of go through that research methods very quickly, and they're not, I don't think that they get to it as simply as it can be gotten to, which is basically, what is the research question in statistical language? Talk about that. And what is the level of measurement of your variables? And I'll talk about this. If I can scroll. So, research questions in statistical language. What is that? So, most types of questions can be asked with, does A relate to B? Okay, talk about, okay, that's statistical language. Are there differences on A by B? Okay, and does A predict B? And basically, this relationship business, based on a level of measurement, we're in kind of correlation or chi-square land, all right? We're narrowing things down. Differences, okay? We're on t-test land and ANOVA land, okay? And prediction or impact, A with B, you're in regression land. That covers a swath of tests, okay? Like there's lots of, I don't know, 20 tests in there, okay? All kinds of tests. So relating two variables, differences on one variable by another, okay, or differences across time, or prediction or impact or something of this sort, okay? But to know once you have that kind of language relating to differences, predicted, once you have that language, the next question you need to ask is, what is the level of measurement of those A's and B's? What is that? Okay. All So there's basically three broad levels of measurement here, okay? All right. The first is nominal, all right? So a nominal is just, it's Latin for name only. That's the mnemonic, name, nominal, okay? Male, female, Republican, Democrat, Green, whatever. They're just labels. That's all they are, okay? There's no hierarchy. There's no things of this sort. Okay. The next level is ordinal, okay? Here you have an order, okay, to those levels, like small, medium, extra large, slow, moderate, laggard plus or something, okay? So there's an order, okay? But they're not equal in intervals, okay? So they're labels, small, medium, gigantic, extra large, okay? Those are labels. And there's an order to those from small to extra large, okay? But not equal. Continuous is, I'm using these scale or interval or ratio. I'm using these all synonymously because these levels of measurement impact the type of test, okay? So when I say continuous, they're all synonymous. Again, there are lots of names for these things. They differ slightly, but for our purposes, okay, continuous variables have a label, okay? Age 1, age 2, age 3, age 4 labels. They have an order, 1 before 2, 2 before 3, 3 before 4, okay? And they're equally spaced, not counting leap year, okay? We have 365 days in between each one, okay? So those are the two pieces of information you need to know to get to the type of test. All right. So let's do this, the relating part, okay? All right. Nominal and nominal. Very, very common, incredibly common, okay? I have a pre and post intervention, and I have males and females, okay? Okay, so those are my two variables, and I'm assessing whatever. Number of correct answers, okay? All right, so you have some outcome variable, some frequency of correct answers, okay? So nominal time, pre-post, nominal gender, male, female, okay? And then so nominal is A relate to B, does gender relate to test with regard to correctness? Okay, you're in chi-square land. Also nominal and ordinal. It could be, well, time 1, time 2, right? There's some period going on there. Time 1, time 2, time 3, all right? Ordinal, okay, by male, female, all right? So we're still in chi-square land. So once you're dealing with relating types of questions and nominal and ordinal, okay, you're in chi-square land. Now we have ordinal, scale, okay? Here we're in correlation land, all right? So as income goes up, the savings go up. As age level goes up, the savings go up, okay? So once you have these A's and B's relating to each other of this level of measurement, you're in Spearman and Pearson correlation. The Pearson, you need both A's and B's to be scale, okay? All right. Differences on A by B, okay? So it depends upon how many levels B has. When B has only 2 levels, okay? That is, I'm looking at, test scores by gender, okay? Test scores by gender. We're using gender with 2, okay? Male, female. All right. So we're really in t-test land there, okay? So We could do an independent samples t-test. Are there differences on test scores by gender? Now, if B has 3 or more levels, are there differences on test scores by 3 or more levels? Male, female, non-binary, okay? That's out there, right? So now we're into ANOVA land, okay? So once you have 3 or more levels, okay, and we're looking for differences, okay? We're into ANOVAs. Scale by ordinal, you can still do a t-test if it was time 1, time 2, okay? Or ANOVAs, you can still use those as grouping variables, okay? Once you have your outcome variable as ordinal, now you're into kind of a Mann-Whitney. It's called a non-parametric test, okay? What's a non-parametric test? Non-parametric test is these are tests that do not have the assumptions of the t-test and the ANOVAs, okay? All right. So you can take a look at that slide, okay? The Wilcoxon and the Friedman, these are just when you have paired, okay? So rankings before, rankings after, I'm in Wilcoxon land, okay? Rankings before, rankings after, rankings 6 months after, okay? All right, so I'm in Friedman test land. So and I'm going to jump to a tool to get there too, but okay. And then let's just go to the prediction part. So here, the key thing is what the outcome variable is. A is predicted by this B. Doesn't matter what B is here. It's the outcome variable. If A is thing I'm trying to predict is nominal and binary, I'm into a binary logistic regression. I'm using some variables to predict a binary outcome. If I have a nominal variable, okay, and it has more, it's not binary, it's got 3 or more levels, okay, I'm trying to predict Republican, Democrat, Independent, I'm in a multinomial regression. If the outcome variable, the A, is ordinal, I'm doing an ordinal regression, and the most common is the outcome variable is a scale variable, okay? And I'm just doing a linear or multiple linear regression, multiple if you have multiple predictors. Okay. So I think I want to just jump to, how we doing on time? I think we're okay. So let's just do this for a second. So let's just put that into action here. So here's a tool, here's a decision tree. You can see some of these things, differences, predictions, relationships. So let's just, I want to examine relationship between my variables, and they're all scale. I'm doing a correlation. We could have said Pearson correlation, but okay. All right. So you get either a Pearson correlation or a Spearman. There's an assumption of linearity, but also the level of measurement has to be scale. Okay. I want a predicting outcome. I need to know what that outcome variable level is. Okay, if it's ordinal, I'm doing ordinal logistic. Okay, so just to know that there is a decision tree to support you in getting to the correct analysis by using this. And you can play around with this, you can't break this, so forth. Okay. Flip back. All right. Let's see if there's some questions here around that before I move on here. And I will go, you'll put those into the Q&A. Now look in the Q&A. All right. Okay. All right. There's a lot of folks here, and I am sure I was not crystal clear on numerous points. So this is your opportunity to get that clarification. All right. So feel free. There's no dumb questions here. Because again, I mean, if that's perfect, I'm not gonna be able to walk outside the door if I explain everything so perfectly, no one has a question. Or I utterly confused you, in which case you don't even know what to ask. So one of those two options, either I did it perfectly or terribly, but we'd like to get to see how I can help clarify things for you. Or maybe even who's stuck at the moment. Let's just do a quick one of those. I'll give it another moment and I will happily move on. Okay. All right. Perfect. Okay, with D&P projects, we're looking at pre-post knowledge change. So what would that be? So great question. So the most D&P projects, okay, quality improvement, okay, things of this sort. All right, pre-post tests is a paired t-test, okay? So we're over here. So we're over here. Differences, really differences from pre to post. That's what we're looking for, all right? And it's often a scale variable like knowledge, okay, good. And then by nominal, some pre-test and post-test, okay? So really there's no clean IV, there's just really two DVs, dependent variables over time, okay? Sorry. What are you struggling with specifically? If you can just elaborate on that.
And if you want to raise your hand, we can unmute you as well.
We'll just do one quick one and then we'll move on to qual.
Okay.
Was there a hand raised or no?
Yeah, 1 second. Oh, you put your hand down, I see.
That's okay.
Oh, there we go.
All right.
Oh, no. Hang on.
That's okay. I'm happy to move on.
Okay, we can unmute at the end too.
Well, at the end,
Yeah.
we'll keep moving through. Because I want to get through this, touch on the tools, touch on courses that can help, and then open up for questions. Okay. So let's jump into qualitative. And this will, okay. So qualitative, typically the questions are the aims. Those are the aims that are driving that semi-structured interview, which is typically the use case here, okay? Typically there's semi-structured interviews. I know there's other kinds of qualitative data, but that's one thing that has to be in the methodology. Participants, obviously these participants have to have, some experience in the topic. You're studying teachers, you need to go to teachers, okay? Just common sense. Instruments, procedures, typically it's semi-structured interviews. The data analysis plan is often just and I'll show you the tool. It's a process of excerpting, okay? Basically excerpting, most people doing phenomenological, some people doing other kinds of things, but typically speaking, there's a process of excerpting important passages, combining those together to create some codes, then combining the codes to create some overarching themes, okay? And then tying those themes to your study aims or research questions. That's basically that data plan, okay? Sample sizes, I think you'll hear people talking about saturation. What does that mean? Well, saturation basically means that there's no new data coming out, right? If I'm asking teachers about what they like and don't like about their job, at some point in time, all right, there's not going to be anything new going on. That's saturation, all right? All right. Ethical considerations, I think care should be given to ethical considerations, no matter what methodology. The opportunity for more personal information is obvious in qualitative, okay? All right. So, you know, confidentiality is critical. Anonymity is even better. Okay. How are you storing data? What are you doing to protect them? Okay, that has to happen. So you should care about, if you want honesty, okay, you want to learn something, you're gonna have to care for their information. Okay. All right, other considerations going on here. Curating data. Under practical considerations, and I'll show you in a second. Most people, if you have 10 interviews, you have 10 separate interviews, okay? So 10 transcripts, and they'll put those 10 transcripts in, and that's okay. I find myself very frequently putting in by the study aim. For example, if there's 5 questions, and the first 3 are dealing with study aim 1, and the latter 2 questions of the interview are dealing with study aim 2, okay? I'm probably dividing up those 10 transcripts into 20. I'm going to take research question 1, semi-structured interview questions for 10 folks, and I'm going to have 10 interviews, okay, just with study aim 2 in there, okay, another 10. And I find that that's really, it helps me drill in. I know the only responses are related to that study aim and question. That's enormously powerful. There's no bleeding over of other questions, and it's very concentrated. So although doing it by interviewee is, I'll say, typical, I don't think that's the best practice. I think it should be by research question or study aim or interview section or by domain, okay, right? So you're assessing teachers and administrators and parents. I would not put them all in there together. Even if there were only 2 teachers and 2 administrators and 1 parent, I think I would separate them out, all right? Because you can have a theme, let's just say, related to teachers, or a theme related to teachers and administrators, and if you put them all in there. But I would rather have it be this way. Teachers have some themes, administrators have some themes, parents have some themes based on their interviews, okay? Then I'm going to do those analysis, do 3 projects, okay? It's a little extra work, but it's worth it. Do 3 separate projects, just for teachers, just for admins, just for parents. Then you're going to have a very nice results chapter, because in that results chapter, you're going to say, guess what? Among my 3 columns, okay, of types of participants or roles, all right, here's themes that emerge in all of them, or something close to it, all right? That's good to know. All teachers, admins, and parents care about this issue. Safety, for example, or some damn thing, okay, whatever it is. All right, so you're going to have common themes, but then you're going to have unique themes that teachers care about, but the admins and parents don't. And ditto for admins and ditto for parents, okay? That's important because you're going to get into their heads about how teachers are thinking differently to the same darn questions than parents and admins. And parents, how they're thinking differently, okay, than teachers and admins around those same semi-structured interview questions. That's powerful empathy to understand similarities and differences and developing, I'll say, the persona of each of those roles, okay? That's going to help you make changes, not only answer the questions, but understand those roles and help you make changes, right? That if teachers don't care about this, but it's a hot item for parents, okay, or hot for teachers and parents, but admins don't care, all right, or whatever, it's going to help you meet your goals by knowing that up front. Okay. All right. So think carefully before just sticking the data in there in that typical way. All right. All right. What else? Other practical considerations. The quality is obviously more important than the quantity. And in fact, when we run stuff, oftentimes we see, God knows how many, 120 codes. Too many codes. I can't think that far and wrap my brain around it. You have to have quality, but also I'll say comprehensibility. Okay. You have to have things that people can wrap their brains around. If you have 3 research questions, you have 30 themes per research question. Who's going to hold in their brain 90 themes? Okay. What faculty member is going to do that? What journal is going to publish 90 themes? I don't think many myself. All right. So, all right. So keep everything manageable. Okay. As Judge Judy says, if it doesn't make sense, it's probably not true. And if it doesn't make sense that there's 90 themes there, maybe we don't have 90 themes. Okay. So, all right. I think I can get to some of the, just to show you some of these tools here real quick. So this is, I'll just get an example data set here. So, let me see here. This will work. Not too much. Oh. Oh, it's gonna grab one. Okay. All righty. So just a brief overview of this thing. Projects, you get data in. You can upload data from different files. Okay, you can use example data sets. You can enter data manually, or it can be shared. Okay. Management is where you manage the data, create composite scores, things of that sort, typical data management. By the way, for those of you who have not done quant before, let me just tell you, my experience is 90% of the job is data management, getting things in the right order and so forth. So stay tuned. We have a data cleaning wizard, which gets you some of the way, okay, but there's often a lot of work to be had and thoughtful work. So it's just not purely grunt work. It's like, how am I treating that level of measurement of that variable? Things of this sort. There's different plots to be had. Okay, just share one of them. I can look at different reading, by sex. All right, so you got different types of plots. And then the analysis, you really do everything from descriptives to structural equation modeling, all chi-squares, regressions, ANOVAs, t-tests. Let me just share the paired t-test because it's very common. For all of these tests, very simple. Select the test, put in the variables, the difference between reading 1 and reading 2, or reading post-test, okay? All right, put the variables in, hit calculate. For all of these tests, you'll be surprised that the assumptions are built in. So for novices, including faculty that, just don't use it all the time, it identifies the assumption, identifies the name of the test to test that assumption, it runs that test, and then interprets that test. Any of you DMPs out there, this is a winner for you, okay? Put that in your own voice, you pass the assumption. Here, the results are in plain English. Guess what? That t-test was significant. This is how you can report it. And here's an interpretation. Reading 1 was lower than post-reading, okay? That's an APA table, by the way. That's helpful scrollovers It's a plot, all downloads to an editable Word document. I won't stay too long here, but just know that all of those other tests get you there with the same ease. Assumptions, APA tables, interpretation. Okay. I'll also highlight the power analysis because I mentioned that earlier. I used to struggle with it a lot until we created a tool that says, hey, for a paired t-test, okay, you need about 34 folks here. I won't get into the different effect sizes, but just know that roughly speaking, to detect small effects, you need large samples to detect that. Huge differences, huge effects, okay, you need a small sample to determine that. But if you go down the middle of the road, medium effect size, you should look at the literature to see what other effect sizes have been had. But okay, just pick the test. In this case, pick the predictors, and in 2 seconds you have that. You can put that in your own voice. You can reference Intellectus. That's the quant. The qual, also quick and easy. Once you have your transcripts in, I have 4 transcripts. You can simply go to the inductive coding. Basically, what's happening is that it's excerpting important passages. Okay. It's collapsing those important passages and then generating a AI code name and code description. For all of these things, you have to vet them, okay? You may not like that code name. You may not like that code description. You may not think all those excerpts hang together in there. So you have to really be mindful as you found 24 codes, 63 excerpts. Okay, and you can see the codes over here. You can go back in and grab the themes, okay? Here the question is, how do these codes go together? All right. And you can update this, you know, with more or less, more or fewer themes. And now you have kind of a, you could look at the details of the theme name and theme description and the codes involved and the excerpts. You can visualize what's happening here by going to the theme occurrences, and you can see the themes here, the participants here, and then the contribution of each participant to each theme and the number of excerpts. So that's happening. You can also tie the themes to the research questions. You can use AI to do that. I like to kind of use them all and then just kind of delete after. But it said, hey, gosh, those 4 themes in particular help address that research question. And in the output, you can see the research question, you can see the theme, and then this is the rationale for why that theme helps address that research question. Okay, and that downloads to a Word doc. By the way, there's consulting with both of those, should you need it, but we've tried to make it as simple as possible, okay? The other piece is, I'll just mention briefly that we will be coming out with a literature review tool very, very shortly. We're in the final stages. So for those young faculty that are needing to get lit reviews put together, we'll be there to help before you know it. Okay. So let me go back to the Q&A slideshow from current slide. Okay. Do we have questions in the Q&A at all?
Not at the moment, but feel free to type them in, or if you want to raise your hand, I think we could do it that way as well.
while you're waiting for that, let me just put this slide up here. You can get a consult with me by clicking that QR code. We also have Samantha on the line. She can help with student support. Okay, no problem. Ashley, any faculty support, trials, demos, help with your own research project. Don't want to be a co-author, but if we can do double duty by showing you the tool with your own data, terrific. Melissa, any general questions, technical difficulties, talks that I can give to your department? Happy to do that. Phone number and then some of the websites for the qualitative, quantitative, and then Statistics Solutions just has you know, lots and lots of, you know, hundreds of pages of resources, mostly around quant. Okay. Do we have any questions? Yes. Can you elaborate on how the literature review tool will generate narrative? Nope. We're gonna hold off on that. We'll hold off on that tool till we roll it out. But thank you for your interest, David. I'm gonna stick to the method here, but I just want to give a little highlight, a little tease. Okay. Other questions, if any? You don't have to have a question, but if you do, we'll take it.
Yes, the session will be available for viewing again. We're going to email the recording to everyone, and then we'll send links to our other sessions. We do have some DNPs or nurse researchers in here next week on Thursday. The session is specific to DNP projects and nurse researchers, so feel free to join that one.
And we'll get all of the workshops and webinars in an email to you.
Yes.
I would just say too, please share it with other folks. Sometimes, despite our efforts, not everybody knows that free workshops are out there or that, you know, cool tools are out there. For qualitative, do you upload the entire transcript? So yes, you can upload the entire transcripts. So you can upload, you know, as many transcripts as you want in one shot. How do we know security and privacy for doing so beyond removing all identifying information? So that's a really good question. So we use, let me go to the website. So we use the latest security. So definitely de-identify. All right. Privacy and security. I think is another. I want to say FAQ though. I think it's we got an FAQ here, which has a little bit better. So here's some of our privacy. Basically, it's encrypted at rest. It's encrypted during transit, but you can see some of the data privacy stuff here. And also our terms and agreement with our APIs is that they don't use that data for training at all. So that's we use Amazon servers, which is, you know, everyone cares about data privacy and security. And frankly, most people don't want our data, to be quite honest with you, okay? So that's the other part of it. But I know for IRB and other things, you know, so that's some place where you can get some information around data security. And then Melissa put in a chat, We protect your data using industry standard SSL encryption, increasing the security of all data transfers within our application. Once uploaded, data is stored securely, ensure that data can only be accessed while logged into your account. To further enhance the safety and security of your data, we recommend you de-identify your data prior to uploading it. Yeah. Other questions here? We have any? We may not. Alrighty, so that's fine. Again, if you're a student or faculty, if you're a student, hopefully the webinar was helpful to describe some of the highlights around quant and qual methodology. For students wanting to do analysis, certainly, please evaluate yourself to intellectus statistics and intellectus qualitative. For faculty, feel free to get demos, trials. Happy to show it to your colleagues. And particularly in a time of having to do more with less these days. Fewer grants, a little bit tighter on money. I'm assuming at most institutions, or definitely some institutions. So this can really help expedite your research and keep that moving. All right, if there's no other questions, I think we'll end a few minutes early, and I want to thank you all for your attendance. Please share the recording with others, and anyway, we'll look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.